Have you ever met someone who was clearly a mess, emotionally unavailable, commitment phobic, still hung up on their ex, dealing with unresolved trauma, clearly not ready for what you're offering? And instead of walking away, you thought, but I can help him or her. I can love him through it or her. I could be different. I could be the one who finally gets through to him or her. That feeling when you see all the red flags, when your friends are telling you to run, when every rational part of your brain is screaming that this person isn't ready, but you stay anyway because you see their potential, because you believe that with enough love, enough patience, enough understanding, you can actually help them become the person you know they could be. You're not delusional, and you're not alone in that exhaustion, because we live in a culture that romanticizes the idea of healing love. The belief that the right person can fix a broken man, that love conquers all, that if you just love someone hard enough, consistently enough, unconditionally enough, they'll transform into the partner that you need them to be. Movies are even built on this narrative. Romance novels glorify it. Social media celebrates the woman who stood by her man through his mess and came out the other side with a transformed partner. We're taught that loving someone through their worst is noble, that staying when things are hard is loyalty, that seeing someone's potential and believing in them when no one else does is what real love looks like. And on the surface, it sounds beautiful. It sounds like the kind of love everyone wants: unconditional, patient, transformative. But here's what nobody talks about. You're not a rehabilitation center for broken men or women. Potential means nothing without action, really. And your love, no matter how pure, how strong, how unconditional, cannot heal someone who isn't committed to healing themselves. And this is the I can fix him or her delusion. And it's destroying more women and men than almost any other pattern in modern relationships. If you think about Summer Walker for a moment, incredibly talented artist, successful, beautiful, has everything going for her professionally. Yet her relationship history is, a pattern of choosing men who are clearly not ready, men who are emotionally unavailable, men who are dealing with their own unresolved issues, men who from the outside are obviously not capable of giving her what she deserves. London on the Track, publicly toxic, drama-filled, resulted in a child but not a stable partnership. Larry, another situation where she's clearly given more than she's receiving, clearly trying to make something work with someone who just isn't matching her energy. And with each relationship, you can see the pattern. She sees something in them, some potential, like we all do or have experienced, some possibility. She believes she can be the one who helps them become better. She invests her energy, her time, her emotional labor into trying to love them into the version of themselves she knows they could be. Yeah. And each time she just ends up heartbroken, exhausted, posting cryptic messages about being tired of trying, about giving her all and getting nothing back, about loving someone who couldn't love her the way she deserved. Not because she's not enough, not because her love wasn't real, but because she's trying to fix men who haven't committed to fixing themselves, ultimately. Now, I'm not here to judge Summer Walker specifically, only she knows her full truth and what she's working through. Okay, but her public pattern represents something millions of women experience. This exhausting cycle of dating someone's potential instead of their reality. Believing your love can heal them and being devastated when they stay exactly who they were when you met them. And here's what I know for sure. This isn't just happening to celebrities in messy relationships. It's happening everywhere. It's happening to the woman who's dating a man who just needs time to get over his ex, and she's been waiting for 2 years. It's happening to women who's with someone who's working on themselves, but never actually goes to therapy, never actually changes his behavior, never really actually does the work. It's happening to women who sees a good man buried underneath layers of trauma and beliefs. If she just loves him patiently enough, consistently enough, he'll finally heal and become available. So it's happening to women who's exhausted from being the emotional support, the cheerleader, the therapist, the mother figure, all while getting none of the relationship or partnership commitment or emotional availability she actually needs. The result, an exhausting cycle where you're constantly giving, constantly trying, constantly believing. He's almost there. He's making progress. He just needs a little more time while your own needs are, going unmet. Your own life goes on hold, and your own heart slowly starts to break from the weight of loving someone who just can't love you back the way you deserve. So this is the I can fix him delusion. The belief that your love is powerful enough to heal someone who isn't really doing the work to heal themselves. And it's one of the most spiritually depleting patterns of our time. Because if you think about your own life for a moment, have you ever stayed with someone not for who they are right now, but for who you believe they could become? Have you ever invested months or even some of you years into someone who kept promising to change, to work on themselves, to finally be ready, but never actually did? Have you ever looked at a man's potential and convinced yourself that if you just love him hard enough, patient enough, unconditionally enough, he'll finally become that person? If you're honest, you might recognize that you've been dating potential instead of reality. We've all been there at some point. That you've been trying to love someone into healing who hasn't committed to healing themselves. That you've been exhausting yourself just trying to fix someone who isn't actually trying to fix themselves. And the thing is, you think you're being loyal. You think you're being patient. You think you're being the kind of partner who stands by someone through their worst. But really, you're being a rehabilitation center for them. A therapist, a project manager for someone else's emotional growth. And really, that's not a relationship. That's exhausting, one-sided emotional labor that will never result in the partnership you're hoping for. This is the I can fix him delusion, though. And understanding how it works, why we fall into it, what we're actually seeking, and how to break free from it is the first step to finally stopping that cycle of choosing broken men or women, for the men that are watching and trying to, or listening, and trying to love them into wholeness. Just to note, if you enjoy this deep dive into celebrity relationship evolution, check out my 24-hour live stream channels for more content exploring both singles journeys and relationship dynamics. As a subscriber, you can join the conversation, share your perspectives, and connect with others fascinated by these same topics. Subscribe now and become part of our growing community. So let me ask you something. When you look at the person you're with, or the person you're considering being with, are you seeing who they actually are? Or are you seeing who you believe they could become? Because, to be honest, there's a massive difference between the two, and confusing them is costing you everything. You see the red flags, you know they're emotionally unavailable, you recognize they're not over their ex, you can see that they have unresolved trauma, you understand they're not ready for what you're offering, but you also see something else. You see potential. And that potential is more attractive to you than reality. That possibility is something more compelling than what's actually in front of you. So you stay, you invest, you believe, not in who they are, but in who they could become. And that's the trap. The first truth about the I can fix him or her delusion is this. You're not actually attracted to who they are. Not really. You're attracted to who you believe they could become. And that attraction to potential keeps you invested in a fantasy instead of actually dealing with reality. Here's what's actually happening when you're caught in the I can fix him or her pattern. Okay, so you meet someone, and yes, you see the red flags. You see that they're emotionally unavailable, that they're not over their ex, that they have unresolved trauma, that they're not ready for what you're offering, but you see also something else. You see potential, you see the glimpses of the person they could be if they just healed, if they just worked on themselves, if they just had the right support, the right love, the right person believing in them. You see moments where they're vulnerable, where they open up, where they show you the version of themselves that exists underneath all the walls and wounds. And you think, that's who they really are. That's the person I'm connecting with. That's the person I'm building with. If I could just help them become that person consistently, we'll have something incredible. So you invest. You're not in who they are right now, the emotional unavailable person with unresolved issues who's clearly not ready, but in who they could become, the healed version, the available version, the version that exists in your imagination. And here's the trap. That version doesn't exist yet. And to be honest, it might never exist, because potential means nothing without action. Think about Summer Walker's pattern. With every man she's been with publicly, you can see this dynamic play out. She's not staying because they're treating her well right now. She's staying because she sees who they could be. She sees the potential. She sees, she believes in the version of them that could exist if they just healed, if they just grew, if they just became emotionally available. And she invests in that potential. She gives her energy, her time, her emotional labor to just trying to help them become that version. But they don't become that version, because potential, again, without action, is just a fantasy. And she's exhausting herself trying to love someone into a version of themselves they haven't committed to becoming, that they haven't committed to becoming. And this is what makes the I can fix him or her delusion so painful. So painful is that you're not in a relationship with a real person. You're in a relationship with potential, possibility, with a fantasy of who they could actually be. And that fantasy, that fantasy keeps you invested in, even when the reality is hurting you. That fantasy keeps you invested, because every time they show up or show you just a glimpse of that potential, every time they're vulnerable for a moment, every time they say they're going to change, every time they have a good day, you think, see, that's who they really are. That's the person I knew was there. If I could just stay patient, if I could just keep supporting them, they'll become that person consistently. But they don't, because those glimpses aren't who they are. They're who they could be. There's a difference there, and there's a massive, massive difference there between the two. Who they are right now is someone who's emotionally unavailable, and that's just what it is. It's who's not doing the work. Emotionally unavailable, who's not doing the work, who's not ready for what you're offering, who's giving you crumbs while you're giving them everything, who they could be. Who they could be is the healed version, the available version, the version that shows up consistently, treats you well, matches your energy. And, you're staying for the could be while suffering through the is. Think about your own patterns. How many times have you stayed with someone not because of how they were treating you, but because of how you believe they could treat you if they just healed? How many times have you seen red flags but stayed anyway because you saw potential underneath those flags? How many times have you invested months or years into someone, waiting for them to become the person you knew they could be, while they stayed exactly who they were when you met them? And if you're honest, you might recognize that you've been dating potential, not reality, that you've been in love with a fantasy. We're all guilty of it, again, at some point in our life. But you've been in love with a fantasy, not a person. That you've been exhausting yourself trying to help someone become something they haven't committed to becoming. And that's the painful truth. You know, here's the other painful truth. They might never become that person. Not because they can't, but because they're not doing the work to actually get there. Potential without action is meaningless. Possibility without commitment is just a fantasy. You know, someone can help or can have all the potential in the world to be an incredible partner. They can have all the qualities underneath their wounds. They can, you know, have glimpses of emotional availability. But if they're not actively working on themselves, if they're not in therapy, not addressing their trauma, not taking responsibility for their patterns, not doing the actual work of healing, that potential will never become a reality. And you can't do the work for them. You can't love them into healing. You can't be patient enough, supportive enough, understanding enough to make them actually choose growth. They have to choose it themselves. And if they're not choosing it, you're wasting your energy trying to love them into a version of themselves they're just not committed to becoming. Think about, again, Summer Walker's exhaustion in her posts. You know, the constant heartbreak, the pattern of giving everything and getting nothing back. And it's not because she's not enough. It's not because her love isn't real. It's because she's been trying to love men into healing who aren't doing the work to heal themselves. You know, dating potential instead of their reality. And potential doesn't keep you warm at night. Potential doesn't show up consistently. Potential doesn't give you the partnership you deserve. Only reality does. And if the reality is that they're not ready, they're not available, not doing the work, then no amount of seeing their potential will change that. And this is why the I can fix him or her delusion is so exhausting. You're constantly investing in a future version of someone that might never exist, you know, while the current version is hurting you, disappointing you, leaving your needs unmet. You're in a relationship with potential, not a person, and potential just can't love you back. So here's what you need to understand. Seeing someone's potential is not the same as being in a relationship with them. Believing who they could become is not the same as being with who they are. Hoping they'll heal is not the same as being with someone who's actively healing. You can see someone's potential and still walk away. You can believe they could be incredible and still recognize that for right now, they're not. You can hope they heal and still refuse to exhaust yourself waiting for them to choose that healing, because here's the truth. You're not dating who they could be. You're dating who they are right now. And if who they are right now isn't treating you well, isn't meeting your needs, isn't doing the work, then their potential is irrelevant. Stop falling in love with potential. I know it's easier said than done, but straight shooter. Stop falling in love with potential. Stop staying for who they could become. Stop exhausting yourself trying to help someone become a version of themselves they haven't committed to becoming. Date reality. Stay for who they are right now, not who you hope they'll become. And if who they are right now isn't enough, if they're not ready, not available, not doing the work, then walk away. Their potential is not your responsibility. Their healing is not your project. Their growth is not your job. You're looking for a partner, not a project. And if you're spending more energy trying to fix them, then you know you're experiencing a partnership with them. You're not in a relationship. You're in a rehabilitation center. You know, and this is the first truth. You're not attracted to who they are. You're attracted to who you believe they could become. And that attraction to potential keeps you invested, of course, in a fantasy, while the reality exhausts you, disappoints you, and breaks your heart over and over again. Just to note, if you enjoy this deep dive into celebrity relationship evolution, check out my 24-hour live stream channels for more content exploring both singles journeys and relationship dynamics. As a subscriber, you can join the conversation, share your perspectives, and connect with others fascinated by these same topics. Subscribe now and become part of our growing community. The question you've been avoiding, you know, why are you so attracted to broken men or women. Not just attracted, drawn to them. Like there's something magnetic about someone who needs fixing. Like you can spot an emotional unavailability from across the room and feel pulled towards them. You know, you tell yourself it's compassion, not you're just a loving person. Sorry, that you're just a loving person. That you see the good in people when others don't. But if you're really honest, if you dig underneath the surface explanations, you might discover something slightly uncomfortable. Your need to fix broken men isn't about them at all. It's about you. The second truth about the I can fix him delusion is this. You need to fix broken men or women. Your need to fix broken men or women isn't actually about them. It's about your own unhealed wounds, trying to prove that if you can just love someone enough, you're worthy of being loved back. Here's the deeper pattern underneath the I can fix him delusion. It's not actually about them, it's about you. When you're constantly choosing broken men or women, when you're attracted to people who need fixing, when you keep investing in emotionally unavailable people who clearly aren't ready, you're not just being compassionate or patient or loving, you're trying to heal something in yourself. Because here's what the I can fix him or her pattern is really about. It's a trauma response. It's your wounded self trying to prove that if you can just love someone hard enough, perfectly enough, unconditionally enough, you'll finally be worthy of being loved back the way you've always needed. Think about where this pattern usually comes from. Maybe you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, and you spent your childhood trying to earn their love, trying to be good enough, perfect enough, helpful enough to finally get the affection and validation you needed. Maybe you experienced abandonment or rejection early in life, and you just kind of internalized that belief that love is something you have to earn, something you have to work for, something that only comes if you prove your worth through service and sacrifice. Maybe you learn that, you know, your value comes from what you can do for others, not from who you are, that you're only worthy of love if you're useful, if you're helping, if you're fixing someone else's problems. And now as an adult, you're unconsciously recreating that dynamic in your relationships. So you're choosing men or women who are emotionally unavailable, just like that parent was. You're trying to earn their love through patience, support, and unconditional giving, just like you tried to earn love as a child. You're believing that if you can just love them perfectly enough, they'll finally become available, just like you believe that if you were just good enough, that parent would finally see you. But here's the painful truth. You're not actually trying to fix them. You're trying to fix your childhood wound. You're trying to prove that you're worthy of love. You're trying to finally earn what should have been freely given. And you're using broken men or women as a vehicle for that healing. Think about Summer Walker's pattern. The constant choosing of men who aren't ready. You know, the exhaustion of trying to make it work with people who can't meet her where she is. The cycle of giving everything and getting nothing back. And on the surface, it looks like, you know, she's just has bad taste in men. Like, you know, she keeps choosing the wrong people. But if you look deeper, if you look deeper, you might see something else. Someone who's actually trying to prove her worth through service. Someone who believes that if she can just love someone hard enough, she'll finally be worthy of being loved back. Someone who's trying to heal an old wound by fixing broken men. And this is what makes the I can fix him or her delusion so insidious. It masquerades a love as compassion, as loyalty. But the truth is underneath is often a trauma response. It's your wounded self trying to finally earn the love you didn't get when you needed it most. And you're exhausting yourself in the process because you can't heal your childhood wound by fixing a grown man or woman. You know, you can't prove your worth by learning or earning love from someone who's emotionally unavailable. You can't finally feel worthy by succeeding where you failed as a child. The wound that makes you choose broken men or women can't be healed by fixing them. It can only be healed by you, by recognizing that your worth was never conditionally or conditional on your ability to earn love. By understanding that you deserve to be loved freely as a child, and you deserve to be loved freely now, by choosing people who can see your value without you having to prove it. Think about your own patterns. Why are you attracted to broken men or women? Why do you keep choosing people who need fixing? Is it really about them, or is it about something deeper in you? Maybe you feel most valuable when you're needed, when you're helping, when you're fixing someone's problems. Maybe you're uncomfortable with relationships where, you're not working hard to earn, or you're not working hard to earn love, where someone just loves you without you having to prove your worth through service. Maybe you're scared of being with someone who's actually available. Because if they're available and they still reject you, it means you're not enough. But if they're unavailable, their inability to love you isn't about you, it's about their brokenness. Maybe you're choosing broken men or women because it's safer. Because you can blame their unavailability on their wounds instead of facing your fear that even if someone was fully available, you still might not be enough. This is the deeper truth about the I can fix him or her pattern. It's not about compassion. It's about protection. You're protecting yourself from the vulnerability of being with someone who's fully available. Because if they're available and it still doesn't work, you have to face your deepest fear that you're not worthy of love. But if you choose someone who's broken, someone who's unavailable, someone who can't love you back, then their inability to love you isn't about you, it's about them. It's about their wounds. And you can keep believing that if you just heal them or help them heal, then they'll love you. Then you'll finally be worthy. But that day never comes, because you're trying to earn something that should be freely given. You're trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. You're trying to heal a wound that can't be healed through fixing someone else. Think about how exhausting this is. How much energy you've spent trying to help men or women heal who aren't doing the work to heal themselves. How many years you've invested in people who keep promising to change but never did. How much of your own life you've put on hold waiting for someone to finally become available. And underneath all that effort, all that patience, all that unconditional giving is a wounded part of you that still believes you have to earn love, that still believes if you can just be perfect enough, helpful enough, patient enough, you'll finally be worthy. But you were always worthy. You didn't need to earn it then. You don't need to earn it now. Your worth is not conditional on your ability to fix broken men or women. Your value is not determined by whether you can love someone into healing. You're not more worthy because you stayed with someone who couldn't love you back. You're worthy because you exist. And you deserve to be with someone who sees that worth without you having to prove it. Someone who's available without you having to fix them. Someone who loves you freely, not because you earned it, but because you're you. You're you. But you can't receive that kind of love while you're choosing people who can't give it. You can't experience being loved freely while you're exhausting yourself trying to earn love from the emotionally unavailable. You have to heal the wound that makes you choose broken men or women. You have to recognize that you need to fix them. You have to recognize that your need to fix them is really about, your need to prove your worth. And you have to choose differently. Not men who need you, but men who choose you. Not potential, but reality. Not projects, but partners. Think about what it would feel like to just be with someone who just loves you without you having to fix them first, without you having to prove your worth through endless patience and service without you having to earn their availability through your unconditional support. Someone who shows up because they want to, not because you finally made them ready. Someone who values you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. Someone who's already whole, not someone you're trying to make whole. That might feel uncomfortable, scary, too easy, like something's missing, but what's missing isn't chaos. It's the familiar pattern of earning love instead of receiving it. And that discomfort is actually pointing you towards healing, because if being loved freely feels wrong, that's a sign that your nervous system is still wired to believe you have to earn love, that you're still operating from the childhood wound that says you're only worthy if you're useful. So the work is to sit with that discomfort, to recognize it for what it is, and to choose differently anyway. To choose someone who's available even though it feels too easy. You know, to receive love even though you haven't earned it through service. To be valued for who you are even though you're not fixing anyone. And this is how you heal the wound that makes you choose broken men or women. Not by fixing them, but by choosing differently yourself. You know, by recognizing that your worth was never conditional, that you deserve to be loved freely as a child, that you deserve to just be loved freely now, and that you don't need to prove that worth by successfully transforming an emotionally unavailable man into or a woman into an available one. That's my you're worthy right now, ultimately, as you are, you know, without fixing anyone, without earning anything, without proving anything. And the right person will see that, you know, without you having to demonstrate it through years of patience, you know, patient service to their healing journey. This is the second truth. Your need to fix broken men isn't about them. It's about your own unhealed wounds, trying to prove that, you know, if you can just love someone enough, you're worthy of being loved back. But you can't heal that wound by fixing them. You can only heal it by recognizing that your worth was never conditional in the first place. Just to note, if you enjoy this deep dive into celebrity relationship evolution, check out my 24-hour live stream channels for more content exploring both singles journeys and relationship dynamics. As a subscriber, you can join the conversation, share your perspectives, and connect with others fascinated by these same topics. Subscribe now and become part of our growing community. Let me tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. The man or woman you're trying to fix, he or she didn't ask you to fix them. You met him exactly as he is, emotionally unavailable, dealing with unresolved trauma, not ready for what you're offering. And instead you're accepting that reality and walking away. You decided, I can help him. I can be the one who gets through to him. I can love him into healing. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. Did he ask you for that help? Did he say, please fix me? Did he request that you put your life on hold to manage his emotional growth? Or did you just volunteer that role without asking him? Because if he didn't ask you, if you assigned yourself the job of being his therapist, his emotional support system, his rehabilitation center, then you need to understand something critical. Your unsolicited help isn't helping him, it's enabling him. The third truth about the I can fix him or her delusion is perhaps the most painful. You know, the men you're trying to fix aren't asking you to fix them, and your unsolicited emotional labor is keeping both of you stuck in a dynamic that prevents real growth and real connection. Here's what nobody tells you. Here's what nobody tells you about the I can fix him or her pattern. That they didn't ask you to fix them. You know, you met them exactly as they are. Instead of accepting that reality and walking away, you decided I can help. You decided to do that. You volunteered that role, or you volunteered that role. You assigned yourself the job of being their therapist, their emotional support system, their rehabilitation center. And now you've exhausted yourself. You're resentful, heartbroken, wondering why they're not appreciating your effort, why they're not changing, why they're not becoming the person you've been working so hard to help them become. But they never asked you to do that work. And your unsolicited emotional labor isn't helping them. It's enabling them to avoid doing their own work. Think about what happens when you try to fix someone who hasn't asked to be fixed. You take on their emotional work. You manage their feelings. You try to heal their wounds. You give them endless patience, understanding, and support. And what do? And what do they learn? That they don't have to really do the work themselves. That someone else will manage their emotions for them. That they can stay exactly as they are, broken, unavailable, not growing, and still have someone loving them, supporting them, waiting for them. Your help isn't actually helping. That's the thing, it's enabling. It's allowing them to avoid the discomfort of their own growth. It's preventing them from hitting the bottom that would force them to change. It's giving them all the benefits of your love without requiring them to do any of the work to become someone capable of receiving and reciprocating that love. Think about Summer Walker's pattern. Every time she's with a man who's clearly not ready, clearly not available, clearly not doing the work, she stays, she supports, she tries to love him through it. And what happens? He stays exactly the same because, why would he change? He's getting everything he needs, her love, her support, her patience, without having to do any of the uncomfortable work of actually healing. Her staying isn't helping him grow at all. It's enabling him to stay stuck. And she's exhausting herself in the process, wondering, why her love isn't transforming him, never realizing that her unsolicited emotional labor is actually preventing the transformation she's actually hoping for. Because here's the truth about growth. People don't change because someone loves them enough. They change because staying the same becomes more painful than the work of actually changing. And when you're constantly cushioning someone from the consequences of their emotional unavailability, when you're staying despite their lack of effort, when you're giving them love they haven't earned, even when you're being patient with their behavior that should result in you leaving, you're removing the pain that would motivate them to change. You think you're helping, you think your love, your patience, your support is what they need. And I get it. You think it's what they need to heal, but what they actually need is to experience the consequences of their behavior, to actually lose someone they care about because they weren't ready, to sit with that discomfort of their own unavailability, to hit that rock bottom that forces them to finally do the work. And you're staying, think about it, your staying is preventing that from happening. Think about your own patterns. How many times have you stayed with someone who wasn't ready, believing that your love could help them heal? How many times have you been patient with behavior that should have resulted in you walking away? We've all been guilty of it. It happens to the best of us. How many times, though, have you given second chances, third chances, endless chances, hoping that your unconditional support would finally motivate them to change? And how many times did they actually change? How many times did your patience result in actual growth? Think about it. How many times did your unsolicited emotional labor actually fix them? And if you're honest, the answer is probably never or rarely. And when they did change, it wasn't because of your love. It was because they finally decided to do the work themselves. Because you can't do someone else's healing for them. You can't love them into growth. You can't be patient enough, supportive enough, understanding enough to make them choose to change. They have to actually choose to do it themselves. And they'll only choose it when staying the same becomes more painful than the work of changing. So as long as you're there, cushioning them from that pain, loving them despite their lack of effort, staying despite their unavailability, they have no reason to change. You're not their savior, you're their enabler. And this dynamic isn't just hurting you, it's hurting them too. Because by doing their emotional work for them, by managing their feelings and cushioning them from consequences, you're preventing them from developing the skills they need to actually have a healthy relationship. You're teaching them that they don't have to show up. They don't have to do the work. They can stay emotionally unavailable and still have someone who loves them. And that's not love. That's codependency. And that's keeping both of you stuck. Think about what real love actually looks like in this situation. Real love isn't staying with someone who's not ready and trying to fix them. Real love is recognizing they're not ready and walking away, because walking away might be the wake-up call they need to finally do the work. Real love isn't being endlessly patient with behavior that's hurting you. Real love is having boundaries, because boundaries teach people how to treat you and give them the opportunity to rise to meet your standards. Real love isn't doing someone else's emotional work for them. Real love is allowing them to experience the consequences of their choices, because consequences are often what motivate real change. You think about your love, you think you're being loving by staying, but you're actually being enabling. You think you're helping them by being patient, but you're actually preventing them from experiencing the discomfort that would motivate growth. You think you're showing them what real love looks like by giving unconditionally, but you're actually teaching them that they don't have to earn love. Don't have to show up, don't have to do the work, and that's not helping anyone. Here's what you need to understand. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone who's not ready is to walk away. Not to punish them, not to abandon them, but to allow them to experience the natural consequences of their emotional unavailability. Let them sit with the discomfort of losing someone who loved them because they weren't ready. To give them the space to do their own work without you managing their emotions for them. To stop enabling their stagnation by staying despite their lack of effort. Your walking away might be exactly what they need. It might be the bottom that forces them to finally get help. It might be the wake-up call that motivates them to do the work they've been avoiding, or it might not. It might not. They might stay exactly the same. They might never do the work, but either way, it's not your responsibility. Their healing is not your job. Their growth is not your project. Their emotional availability is not something you can create through love or through your love. They have to choose it, and they'll only choose it when they're ready. And you staying trying to fix them, doing their emotional work for them, doesn't make them ready. It just exhausts you while enabling them to stay stuck. Think about the men in Summer Walker's past. Did her staying help them grow? Did her patience make them ready? Did her unconditional love transform them into available partners? No. They stayed exactly who they were because they had no reason to change. She was there regardless. She was there. And she exhausted herself trying to love them into healing while they stayed comfortably unavailable, receiving all the benefits of her love without doing any of the work to become someone capable of reciprocating it. That's what happens when you try to fix someone who hasn't asked to be fixed. You exhaust yourself. They stay the same, and both of you remain stuck in a dynamic that just prevents real growth and real connection. So stop doing their work for them. Stop managing their emotions. Stop cushioning them from the consequences of their unavailability. Let them experience what it feels like to lose someone because they weren't ready. Let them sit with that discomfort. Let them decide if they want to do the work. If they want to do the work to change. And if they don't, if they stay exactly the same, then, you have your answer. They're not ready. And no amount of your love, no patience or support will make them ready. So you walk away, not with anger or resentment, but with clarity, with the understanding that their healing is their responsibility, not yours. That you can't fix someone who isn't doing the work to fix themselves. That your unsolicited emotional labor isn't helping them, it's enabling them. So this is the third truth. The men you're trying to fix, or women, aren't asking you to fix them. Your unsolicited emotional labor isn't helping them grow, it's enabling them to stay stuck. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away and let them experience the consequences that might finally motivate real change. Just to note, if you enjoy this deep dive into celebrity relationship evolution, check out my 24-hour live stream channels for more content exploring both singles journeys and relationship dynamics. As a subscriber, you can join the conversation, share your perspectives, and connect with others fascinated by these same topics. Subscribe now and become part of our growing community. So here's where you are. You've been dating potential instead of reality, investing in who they could become while suffering through who they are. You've been trying to fix broken men or women to heal your own wounds, ultimately using their transformation to prove you're worthy of love. You've been doing unsolicited emotional labor, enabling them to stay stuck while exhausting yourself trying to change them. These three truths create the perfect trap. They work together just to kind of keep you stuck in an exhausting cycle of where you're given everything, receive nothing, and wonder why your love isn't enough. The attraction to potential keeps you invested in fantasy. The unhealed wound makes you believe you have to earn love through fixing. The enabling dynamic prevents real growth for both of you. And in the space between these forces, you lose yourself, exhausted, heartbroken, wondering why your love isn't transforming them, never realizing that the problem was never that you weren't loving enough. But here's what you need to kind of understand. This doesn't have to be your story forever. These three truths, that you're attracted to potential instead of reality, that your need to fix is really about your own wounds, and that your unsolicited help is enabling stagnation, create the perfect conditions for the I can fix him or her delusion. Together, they explain why you keep choosing broken men, why you exhaust yourself trying to love them into healing, and why you stay long past when you should have left, and why you keep giving chances to people who just aren't doing the work to earn them. The attraction to potential keeps you invested in a fantasy. The unhealed wound makes you believe you have to earn love. The enabling dynamic prevents real growth for both of you. And in the space between these forces, you lose yourself, exhausted, heartbroken, wondering why your love isn't enough, never realizing that the problem was never that you weren't loving enough. The problem is that you're trying to fix someone who hasn't committed to fixing themselves. But there's another way, a path beyond the I can fix them, or him, or them, or her delusion and the exhaustion it creates. And this path begins with a painful but liberating truth. You cannot love someone into healing. That's first and foremost. And you can't fix someone who isn't doing the work to fix themselves. And your worth is not determined by your ability to transform a broken man or woman into a whole one. So imagine a life where you stop choosing projects and start choosing partners, where you date reality instead of potential, where you require people to actually show up as they are, not as who you hope they'll become. And imagine being with someone who's already doing their own work, who's in therapy, who's addressing their trauma, who's, taking responsibility for their patterns, who's actively becoming a better person, not because you're pushing them to, but because they've chosen growth for themselves. Imagine a relationship where you're not exhausting yourself trying to fix someone, where your energy goes beyond or goes towards building partnership of instead of managing someone else's healing, where you're loved freely, not because you earned it through service, but because you're you. And imagine the relief of not being responsible for someone else's emotional growth. Just the peace of not carrying someone else's healing on your back. The freedom of being with someone who's ready for you, not someone you're trying to make ready. And this is what becomes possible when you break free from the I can fix him or her delusion. Not a life without compassion, but a life where your compassion has boundaries. You know, where you can see someone's potential and still walk away if they're not actively working towards it. You know, where you value yourself enough to require readiness, not just possibility. And if you recognize the I can fix him or her pattern in yourself, here's where to start. First, you got to stop dating potential, you know, and start dating reality. So when you meet someone, don't look at who they could become. You know, look at who they are right now and ask yourself, if they stayed exactly as they are today for the rest of their life, would I be happy in this relationship? And if the answer is no, you walk away. Don't stay hoping they'll change. Don't invest in potential. Date who they are, not who they could be. You know, second, recognize that your need to fix is really about you, and it's not really about them. You know, the next time you feel attracted to someone who's broken, someone who needs fixing, someone who's clearly not ready, pause. Ask yourself, why am I attracted to this? What wound in me is drawn to fixing them? What am I trying to prove by staying with someone who's unavailable? And these questions, what they'll do is it'll help you see the pattern for what it is, not love, but a trauma response, not compassion, but an attempt to heal your own wounds through someone else. And third, require them to do their own work. If someone tells you, you know, they're working on themselves, require evidence. You know, are they in therapy? You know, what are they doing? Are they reading books, doing the work, taking responsibility for their patterns? Or are they just saying they're working on themselves while expecting you to manage their emotions? Words mean nothing without action. And if they're not actively doing the work, they're not actually really changing. And your staying won't motivate them to do so. It won't motivate them to start. And fourth, walk away when they're not ready. And this is the hardest part. When you can see someone's potential, when you actually care about them, when you believe they could be incredible if they just healed, it feels cruel to just walk away. I get it. But staying is even crueler to you, because you're exhausting yourself trying to fix someone who isn't doing the work, and to them, because you're enabling them to avoid the consequences that might finally motivate change as well. So walking away isn't abandonment, it's boundaries, it's self-respect, it's recognizing that their healing is not your responsibility. And fifth, heal the wound that makes you choose broken men or women. You know, this is the deepest work. You have to address why you're attracted to people who need fixing. You know, why you feel most valuable when you're needed. Why you're uncomfortable with relationships where you're loved just freely. This usually requires therapy. It usually requires looking at your childhood, your early relationships, the messages you internalize about your worth and how love works. It requires really recognizing that you were worthy of love as a child without having to earn it, and you're worthy of love now without having to prove it by fixing someone. And six, choose people who are already whole, not perfect. You know, no one is perfect. That's not what I'm saying, but whole. You know, people who've done the work, who are in therapy or have been. You know, who take responsibility for their patterns, who show up consistently. People who are ready for you, not people you're trying to make ready. And this might feel, of course, uncomfortable at first, because if you're used to choosing broken men or women, being with someone who's actually available sometimes it might feel boring at first for you, too easy, like something's missing. But that feeling isn't about them. It's about your addiction to fixing. It's your nervous system craving just the familiar pattern of earning love instead of receiving it freely. But sit with that discomfort. Recognize it for what it is and choose differently anyway. And 7th, practice receiving love instead of earning it. This is the real work. Learning to be with someone who just loves you without having to fix them, help them, manage their emotions, prove your worth. Learning to accept that you're worthy of love simply because you exist, not because of what you can do for someone. Learning to be in a relationship where your value is seen and not earned. And this will feel vulnerable. This will feel very vulnerable, scary, exposing. Because if someone loves you freely and still doesn't work, you can't blame their brokenness. You have to face your fear that maybe you're not enough. But that fear is a lie. You are enough. You always were. And the right person will see that without you even having to prove it. So here's a practice to start with. The next time you meet someone and feel that pull, that attraction to their potential, that desire to help them, that belief that you could be the one who fixes them, stop. Don't act on it. Don't pursue it. Don't invest in it. Instead, ask yourself, am I attracted to who they are right now or who I believe they could be? Am I drawn to them or to the project of fixing them? Would I be happy with them if they never changed? If you're attracted to potential, not reality, walk away. No matter how strong that pull is, no matter how much you believe you could help them, because that pull isn't love, it's your wound seeking healing through someone else, and you can't heal that wound by fixing them. Then practice this. When you're tempted to give unsolicited advice, to manage someone's emotions, to do their work for them, don't. Let them sit with their own discomfort. Let them figure out their own solutions. Let them experience the consequences of their choices. And this will feel uncomfortable. You'd want to jump in and help them. You'll feel like you're being cold or uncaring, but you're not. You're practicing what we would like to call them boundaries. You're allowing them to be responsible for their own growth. You're refusing to enable. And you're teaching yourself that your value doesn't come from what you can fix for someone else. And finally, practice this. Choose someone who's already doing their own work. Someone who doesn't need you to manage their emotions, someone who's in therapy, who's taking responsibility, who's actively growing, and then practice just being with them without fixing, without managing, without proving your worth through service. Practice receiving their love. Practice being valued for who you are, not what you can do. Just practice partnership instead of project management. And this will, of course, again, feel strange if you're used to earning love, especially, but it's where real connection lives. It's where you finally experience being loved freely. It's where you discover that you were always worthy. You just needed to stop choosing people who made you prove it. This isn't quick or easy. The I can fix him or her pattern it has deep roots in your early experiences, your understanding of love, your beliefs about your worth. Okay, but with each moment you choose reality over potential. With each time you walk away from someone who's not ready instead of trying to make them ready. With each step towards receiving love instead of earning it, you weaken the patterns hold on your life. You begin to discover what Summer Walker and all of us caught in this pattern need to discover, that your worth is not determined by your ability to fix broken men or women. That you deserve to be with someone who's already whole, that love, real love, doesn't require you to exhaust yourself, proving you're worthy of it.
Just to note, if you enjoy this deep dive into celebrity relationship evolution, check out my 24-hour live stream channels for more content exploring both singles journeys and relationship dynamics. As a subscriber, you can join the conversation, share your perspectives, and connect with others fascinated by these same topics. Subscribe now and become part of our growing community.
Let me paint you a picture of what freedom actually looks like. Not the version where you finally fix him and he transforms into the partner you've always knew he could be or she could be. Not the fantasy where your patience pays off and he finally or she finally becomes emotionally available. Not the dream where your love is finally enough to heal him. Real freedom. The kind where you stop trying to fix broken men or women and start choosing whole ones. The kind where you date reality instead of potential. The kind where you're loved or you're loved freely instead of having to earn it through service. And this is what becomes possible when you finally stop trying to fix broken men or women and start choosing people who are already doing their own work. So let me share what becomes possible when you finally stop trying to fix broken men or women, that is. Imagine if Summer Walker's incredible capacity for love transformed from a tool for fixing unavailable men into the foundation for a partnership with someone who's already or who's ready for her. If her loyalty became about building with someone who matches her energy instead of staying with someone who can't. If she discovered that being with someone whole is far more fulfilling than trying to make someone whole, this shift wouldn't erase her compassion or her capacity to love deeply, but it would transform it into something sustainable, something that builds her up instead of exhausting her, something that results in actual partnership instead of one-sided emotional labor. The same possibility awaits you as well. When you break free from the I can fix him or her delusion, when you stop dating potential and start dating reality, when you choose people who are already whole instead of projects you're trying to complete, your entire experience of relationship transforms. You stop exhausting yourself, stop trying to love people into healing. You stop putting your life on hold, waiting for someone to finally be ready. You stop wondering why your love isn't enough, and you start experiencing what real partnership actually feels like, what it's like to be with someone who's doing their own work, what it's like to be loved freely instead of having to earn it, what it's like to build with someone instead of trying to fix them. Think about what this might look like in your actual life. Imagine being with someone for 6 months. Let's say you're with someone for 6 months and not once having to manage their emotions, not once having to be their therapist, not once having to convince them to do the work of healing, because they're already doing it on their own for themselves. Imagine being in a relationship where your energy goes towards building a life together instead of trying to make them emotionally available, where you're planning a future instead of waiting for them to be ready for one. Imagine being loved by someone who just sees your worth without you having to prove it, who values you for who you are, not for what you can fix for them, who shows up consistently because they want to, not because you've earned it through endless patience. Imagine the relief of not being responsible for someone else's healing. The peace of not carrying someone else's emotional work. The freedom of being with someone who's ready for you instead of someone you're trying to make ready. This is what becomes possible when you break free from the I can fix him or her pattern. For those who've been exhausting themselves trying to fix broken men and women, you stop choosing projects and you start choosing partners. That's what happens. You stop being attracted to potential and start requiring reality. You start staying, or you stop staying with people who aren't, ready, and start walking away when someone shows you that they can't meet you where you are. You start recognizing the signs early. The person who talks about working on themselves, but never actually doing the work. The person who has endless potential, but zero action. The person who keeps promising to change, but stays exactly the same. And instead of staying, hoping, trying to help, you walk away. Not with anger or resentment, but with clarity. With the understanding that their healing is not your responsibility, that you deserve someone who's already doing the work, not someone you're trying to convince to start. You stop feeling guilty as well for having standards. You stop believing that real love means staying with someone who's not ready. You stop confusing patience with enabling. You start building with people who are already whole, who are in therapy, who take responsibility for their patterns, who show up consistently because they've done the work. They've done the work to become someone capable of partnership. And you discover that being with someone who's already healed is not boring. It's peaceful. That partnership with someone who's ready is not less passionate. It's more fulfilling. That love that requires, or that love that doesn't require you to exhaust yourself, earning it, is not less real. It's more sustainable. And what happens is you stop making, you stop mistaking chaos for connection. You stop believing you have to work hard to deserve love. You stop choosing people who make you prove your worth, and you start experiencing what it's like to be loved freely, to be valued simply for just being who you are. To be in a relationship where your worth is recognized and not earned. And this doesn't mean you'll never feel compassion for broken people. It doesn't mean you'll never see someone's potential. It doesn't mean you'll become cold or uncaring. It just means that you'll have boundaries. You can see someone's potential and still walk away. If they're not doing the work, you can have compassion for their struggle and still refuse to exhaust yourself trying to fix them. You can still care about them and still prioritize your own well-being. This is the path beyond the I can fix him delusion. Not a path where you stop caring about people's growth, but a path where you recognize that their growth is their responsibility, not yours, where you can support people who are doing their own work without doing the work for them, where you choose partners, not projects. And the truth is, the I can fix him pattern is just exhausting. For you, for the men you're trying to fix, for the women you're trying to fix, it's exhausting to constantly give more than you receive, to put your life on hold waiting for someone to be ready. Invest years into someone who stays exactly who they were when you met them. Just exhausting to be responsible for someone else's healing. Manage their emotions, to do their own work for them, or to do the work for them while their own needs or your own needs are, just go unmet. Exhausting to love potential instead of reality. To stay with someone who could become instead of walking away from who they are. To keep hoping that this time your love will finally be enough to make them change, but you don't have to stay exhausted. You could choose differently. You can stop choosing broken men or women and start choosing whole ones. You can stop dating potential and start dating reality. You can stop trying to earn love and start receiving it freely. You can recognize that your worth was never conditional on your ability to fix someone. That you deserve to be with someone who's already doing their own work. The real love doesn't require you to exhaust yourself, proving you're worthy of it. So this week, I want to challenge you to notice your patterns around fixing and choosing. Notice if you're attracted to someone's potential more than their reality. If you're staying with someone hoping they'll change instead of accepting who they are. And if you're doing emotional work for someone who should, be doing it for themselves, and then choose differently. If you meet someone who's clearly not ready, walk away. Even if you see their potential, even if you believe you could help them, even if they promise they'll change, walk away, because their healing is not your responsibility. And you deserve someone who's already doing their work or doing the work, not someone you're trying to convince to start. If you're currently with someone who's not ready, stop doing their emotional work for them. Stop managing their feelings. Stop being their therapist. Set a boundary. Tell them, I care about you. I care about you. Of course I do, but your healing is your responsibility. I'm here to be your partner, not your rehabilitation center. If you want to do the work, I'll support you, but I won't do it for you. And then see what they do. If they step up and actually start doing the work, great, brilliant. If they don't, walk away. Because you can't love someone into healing. We've established that. You can't fix someone who isn't doing the work to fix themselves. And staying with someone who's not ready just doesn't help them. It enables them. So remember, you're not a rehabilitation center for broken men or women. Your love is not a tool for fixing people. Your worth is not determined by your ability to transform someone who's unavailable into someone who's ready. You deserve to be with someone who's already whole, someone who's done their own work, someone who shows up consistently, loves you freely, and values you without you having to prove your worth through service. Summer Walker is incredibly talented, beautiful, successful. She has so much to offer, but she keeps choosing men who just can't meet her where she is. Men who need fixing instead of men who are ready for partnership. And she ends up heartbroken, exhausted, posted about how tired she is of, trying, never realizing the problem, never realizing that the problem isn't that she's not, trying hard enough. The problem is that she's trying to fix people who haven't committed to fixing themselves. You don't have to follow that path. You can choose differently. You can stop being attracted to broken men and start requiring whole ones. That's where real love lives, That's where genuine partnership exists. That's where you finally stop exhausting yourself trying to earn love and start experiencing what it's like to receive it freely. The power was never in your ability to fix someone. It was always in your ability to recognize when someone isn't ready and to walk away. That's where your power lies, knowing that you deserve someone who is. You are worthy of love, not because you can fix broken men or women, not because you're patient enough to wait for someone to be ready, not because you can see their potential but no one else sees, or that no one else sees. You're worthy simply because you exist, and that worth doesn't need to be proven through service, earned through patience, or validated by successfully fixing someone. Stop trying to fix broken men or women. Stop choosing whole ones. Stop dating potential. Start dating reality. Stop exhausting yourself trying to earn love. Receiving it freely from someone who's ready to just kind of give it. Yeah. That's where your life actually begins. So as always, stay beautiful, stay connected, and stay conscious in the field.